You and I are violating. You guys watching a pan pal. I'm trying to reach for a pan in my hands. Well, here's a little tiny pan. A pan pal as opposed to a pen pal. I mostly use skillets. Let's see, what do I have here? I have out, this is the unsided skillet that I've been using to do my buckwheat pancake jam. A pen pal is somebody else in the food world. It could be somebody at your favorite restaurant. If you own a restaurant, it could be your employee. It could be guests that come to your restaurant. It could be somebody you swap recipes with. So I was thinking, well, what pen pal of mine can tell this story that has more than the, really a few thousand people read my blog. So when I talked to a man named Joe Yonan, who's a pen pal and is the food editor of the Washington Post, I said, this is a great story. Would you consider writing about it? And as it happened, Joe Yonan had, and if I was a smart dragon, I would have it right at hand. Let me see if I can quickly grab it. He has written a wonderful cookbook called Cool Beans that is newly published. And I'll show it to you. Here it is. Here's Joe's cookbook. You can see we're, both Aaron and I are big cookbook people. We read them. We don't just cook out of them, although we cook out of them too. Anyway, so this is a great guy. Would you write this story? And so 2 years after the fan letter, Joe Yonan writes a story in the Washington Post, which is read by many, 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 many people. And he writes, the story is primarily about Reed and the lentil soup. Not so much me, not so much the book. We're in passing there. And, well, the story came out on March the 8th, just a few days before the reality of the coronavirus in America began to hit everybody in all its ramifications. And here is sweet old Reed in Seattle, right at what was then the epicenter of the virus. And his whole patients, they're all immunosuppressed. He's right in the epicenter, and yet he's taking the time to self-care and make this same old reliable soup that he has been making by now for 17 years. And so Joe prints this recipe on Sunday, March the 8th. Well, this recipe, in a positive sense, winds up going viral because people are just starting to realize that they might have to stay home. They might have to stock their pantries. There should be things in the pantries that are both nutritious, non-perishable, and satisfying. So bunches of people go out and try this recipe, and they like it, and they write about it. And the long story short, and I have made it kind of long, is that recipe and that story was the Washington Post's food section's single most reposted story. And when they invited me on their little chat that they have on Wednesdays, the week after it came out, the tech lady said to me, we've never had a story do this fast. She said, it's viral. And because I'm always trying to learn, I said, well, what exactly does that mean? Because I'm looking for a number. And she said, well, I don't know that I can give you the exact number, but hundreds of thousands of times.
Well, and we are going to link to we'll link to the Washington Post story and then also to your original recipe, so people can look at both of those things. And it's interesting. I don't know anybody who's eaten lentil soup that many times, but I do know a lot of chefs in the industry that for lentil soup is like one of those things they'll make a bunch at the beginning of the week, and when they get home and they're tired, they'll eat because it's satisfying, it's nourishing, and it holds and reheats really well. So it's great for all those reasons. We're going to make probably a batch today that's enough for our family, but if you wanted, you could scale it up and make more and put it in the refrigerator, and it would keep really well. We're going to use green lentils today. Have you made this with other lentils too?
I haven't made this particular soup, but I'll tell you, beans are so forgiving. You know, I'm about to make, there's a Tanzanian coconut black-eyed pea soup that I make, and they were out of black-eyed peas when I got there. So I'm making them with Rancho Gordo Vaquero beans because, you know, any bean would taste good, but these ones happen to be black and white like black-eyed peas were. So I thought, okay, in the spirit of. And, you know, Picasso said, and this is a great slogan for these days, if you don't have green, then orange has got to be there. And, you know, you have, and you can come up with things that are wonderful. So green lentils would work fine.
And I think it's, I think I would always encourage people just not to be scared to try different things. And occasionally it might not turn out well, but you do learn also, and sometimes you have really delightful surprises too when you substitute. Well, we're going to get started making this soup. But thank you so much for joining. I love your cookbooks. I think you do a really wonderful service to everybody, sharing all the information and recipes with people. So thank you again for taking the time to join us.
I'm going to add one thing because a lot of people question this on the Washington Post thing. Of course, there were hundreds of comments. The coriander seeds in it are whole. They are intentionally whole rather than ground, as most people use them. And the reason is, as you're biting along in it, you get a little pop, you get a little crunch, and you get a little of flavor that's very nice. Now, if people don't like coriander, which is to say cilantro, then they should skip it. But use it whole, don't use it ground. It is part of the mojo of it. And don't be afraid of the amount of lemon either. That's also part of the mojo.
All right.
And the mojo is I'm sending love to you guys, and you're sending love to your clients and restaurant patrons and employees, and so here we are together.
Well, thank you again. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. So, hey everybody. I know it's a little technical difficulties. 2 issues. I think there was an issue with the stream for some people, and then also the volume on 2 devices was on, so that means I was all echoey for a little while. But it should be a little bit better now. Sorry, we're still working through. The software to do all this stuff isn't as clear and easy to use as it should be, but we should be good from now on out. So thanks for joining us. That was Crescent Dragon Wagon, if you didn't hear the early introduction. She's a cookbook author and children's book author. But she's author of one of my favorite cookbooks of all time, and when I called her up to bring her on for some cornbread, because that's the cookbook I love, it's called the Cornbread Gospels, she told me the story about lentil soup that was recently a story published in the Washington Post. It's been really popular and circulated a bunch about a nurse who ate this soup for like 17 years straight, every single day for lunch. And so we're going to make this soup. It's a Greek lentil soup. Clover has a bunch of lentil soups. I can't remember how many we have right now, but it might be like 14 or 15 different lentil soups in our recipe set. And we may get to some of those in the future too. There's a spicy coconut lentil soup people really, really love. But today we're going to try to make this Greek lentil soup. So what we need for this is some spinach. Now this is a frozen spinach. I froze this myself, but you could get boxed spinach or anything like that. So frozen chopped spinach is fine. If you want to use fresh spinach, you can as well. Spinach holds up pretty well frozen, so I'm going to be happy with that. Lentils, and we were just talking about what kind of lentils to use. These are green lentils. There are probably a couple different variety of lentils that would work okay for this. I think brown or green lentils would work fine. You would not want to use the orange lentils or red lentils. Those tend to blow apart, and so they'd be a really different experience. You could do that as well, but it'd be a different kind of soup. This kind of lentil will hold its shape more when it's finally cooked. Some of the black varieties of lentils also tend to hold their shape when they're all the way cooked. So we'll use some lentils. And then we have some vegetables to go in the soup. We need some onions, and we have some garlic here. The soup calls for some lemons and lemon juice, and then lemon slices at the end, and some potatoes. The soup also calls for some things I don't have, which is okay. So we're gonna like substitute some ingredients. You guys are gonna get to see how we do that. So specifically, it asks for butternut squash, and we don't have butternut squash. It asks for celery, and we don't have celery. It asks for soup stock also, and I haven't made soup stock recently because I don't have any room in my refrigerator. That's it's like jam-packed right now, and so we're going to use water, which will also work fine. And so let's get started with this recipe. I'm going to start out by getting some heat on our pan, and now we're going to cut some onions. Vi, you want to grab a little bowl to put compost in?
Sure.
So this is, I think, the third time we've cut onions on the show, and we'll keep doing it because it seems like many things you cook start with onions. I like to approach the onion the way what I just did right there. So I'll take one side off with my hand safely held in a claw. I'll take another end off, and then I'll bridge my fingers and come between them. That gives me a nice spot to grab the skin, and then I can go ahead and peel that skin off. And you want to peel back the skin. See, there's a little bit of damage right there still. And the cool thing about the onions is it's just one layer at a time, so you can take it back as far as you need to. Thank you, Vine. That's awesome. And now that pan is probably getting hot. And this is usually the way I would do things. If you are a slower onion chopper, you may want to hold off on putting the flame on the pan. We're pretty quick onion choppers, so I get that heat going at a pretty high rate. I'm going to put some olive oil in here, probably 3 or 4 tablespoons. It's a little bit more than the published recipe calls for, but I love olive oil, and I think that's going to bring the flavors of the spices around really nicely. A lot of spices have different flavors in fat than they do in water, different flavors that move around, and so some things, if you go too lean, you lose some of that flavor. And all right, so we've got the onions here. There's another thing I'm doing a little differently than the Washington Post recipe, and this is sort of a fun thing for people to see if you like recipes and thinking about these kind of things. You can also just pick one of these recipes and follow it, and it'll work really well. But I'm going to make some adjustments to it, which is fine. And if someone wants to make some adjustments to what I'm showing you guys, that's fine too. One of the adjustments is I'm starting with the onions, and I'm going to build the soup on top of that. The recipe that's published in the Washington Post, which I think is from the original, has you cooking up the lentils in the stock, and then cooking the onions separately in a different skillet, and then adding those in. So this is just a different approach, and I generally avoid dirtying dishes if I don't have to, so that's probably a big motivator for me on this. But I also think that it's going to be give us a nice chance to build the flavors. All right, and we'll get you into some of this chopping in a second here, Violet, once I get through these onions and garlics, okay? Actually, if you want, we can get started on one of those potatoes. Would you like to do that? All right, do you want to use my big knife, or do you want to use one of your own little knives?
I might want to use one of the,
Small knife?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, go grab your small knife. Now, I am just peeling these garlics. I took off the back of them, and I'm just peeling them. You can see this garlic is starting to sprout a little bit, and that will change the flavor of it, but we're using everything we have right now, so it'll be a little more bitter than when it doesn't have that sprout. But this is garlic that is from just down the street at a farm called Tree, and I'm sure it's starting to sprout a little bit because it's just getting late in the season, and it's ready to grow. But it's going to be delicious for our soup here. And I check my onions, and I'm allowing some caramelization to build up on them, but not too much. And now we're going through this garlic. All right, you're ready, Vi. That's awesome. All right. We'll get you going on some potatoes in a second, okay? So when you're cooking with onions and garlic, usually you want to start out, I can't really think of any exceptions. Usually you want to start out with the onions because garlic is a lot more fragile than the onions. So you'd want to add the garlic in second. And so here I go adding the garlic in. Now, garlic tastes terrible once it's overcooked or burnt. So I'm going to turn down my temperature a little bit in that pan. And now I'm going to start stirring it. And so now I'm smelling the caramelization of onions, and now all of a sudden the smell of the garlic's hitting me, which is a really nice smell. And I'm going to keep an eye on it because I really don't want it to go too long so that the garlic gets burnt. All right, so now we're out of our onion garlic zone. Let's get going with the potatoes. Let's do this, Vi. I will cut these in planks for you. All right, let me make those a little smaller for your knife. And then why don't you cut them like, why don't you do the, you want to do like the dice like that? You want to do that part?
Sure.
Okay, so I'll cut you some strips here.
So I'm gonna.
There you go. So you're just like gonna cut those so that they're in little dice like that. So this is a medium dice. It's a little bit on the larger side. And what Violet and I are doing is a really fun way to start out when you're cutting. Is I'm doing some of the bigger work, breaking these down. My knife blade's longer and I have longer arms, but I'm setting her up to have some success with some cuts as well. And she's helping me along. There you go, you got that one? I could peel these potatoes. We talked about this a little bit on some previous shows. I try to leave peels on unless they're really offensive. A lot of the vegetables we buy are organic and they have really tasty skins, and they also have a lot of nutrition on the skins. So we're not taking the skin off of this potato. I am keeping an eye out for bad spots though. You can see that the potato went a little bit bad there. And this is a really common thing this time of the year. And you're working with, these potatoes came out of the ground months ago at this point, and they're going to be really tasty and they hold really well, but sometimes you have some bad spots. So you just keep an eye out for that and just work around those. And we'll give this a little stir. So if you want to take a quick peek at how this looks. So I'm getting some translucency on the onions. I'm smelling a really nice garlic smell, but the garlic's not burnt, which is really great. So we're getting close to where we want to be there. And what we're going to do is we're going to add the potatoes and the spinach in with that, and then we're going to bring up the water and the lentils. All right, awesome, Violet, nice job. And I'll show you a trick. So there's two ways I can get these in there that I like. One is I can take a bench scraper, which is over in a drawer over there. The other is if you have a pot that's not too large, you can actually just bring it up to the edge of the table and go ahead and just scoop things right into it. So there we go. We got our potatoes in there. I'm going to bring the temperature back a little bit. And I'm going to go into my spinach now. So we're going to add that spinach in there. I think the recipe is 10 ounces of spinach. All right. Just washing the spinach off my hands. Okay, so I've got the spinach in here, potatoes, onions, and garlic. That's what's in right now. And you can see some of the steam coming off. And now we're going to add the lentils. So we need 1 pound of lentils. You want to help me measure that out? All right. So let's see here. Let's try and see if we can get that to go to 1 pound. I think that should be big enough. You got it? Nice job. Here, I'll help you. Keep going. Keep going. Alright, let's measure how much that is. Not quite. All right. Fill it up all the way. Keep going. Oh, a little bit more. That's good. Nice job. Yeah, so that's 13.5 ounces. Almost like pound. I think that this is so we got up to 14 ounces. Right. 16 ounces. All right. So we got a pound of lentils. Often, if you buy a bag of lentils, they come in a pound. And now we're going to add water to this. So this is a place where if you had some soup stock made, you may add soup stock, which would bring really great flavor to it. But we're cooking with what we had, and like I said, my refrigerator is too full to store any soup stock right now, and so I haven't made any in a little while. So now that the water's on there, and the published recipe has a specific amount of water to use, but when I'm pouring the water in, you can see I wasn't measuring that at all. But that's okay. I'm pouring it to cover everything, and I know that once it comes to a boil, some of that water is going to come off, and I'll probably judge it a little bit as it gets closer to finishing cooking. So we've got in here spinach and potatoes and lentils and garlic. And did I say everything? Water.
Yeah.
All right. We'll add the salt in later. And we'll finish the salt to the taste we want. And we have some spices to add as well, Violet, huh? So I think here, that's a coriander seed. You want to grab that one? And Greek oregano. And I've got some bay leaves here. Alright, so put a couple bay leaves in. These are, you can use any bay leaf. Do pay attention to how fresh the bay leaves are. You can actually buy in some places fresh bay leaves, which are pretty awesome. In your refrigerator, they last a long time. And then once you're not using them fresh anymore, they'll sort of dry out. These ones are still like pretty pungent, so they smell really great and are aromatic. Sometimes there's bay leaves that are years old and they're in really bad shape, and those are not bay leaves you want to use. So, Violet, let's get a measuring spoon to measure out those other ingredients, okay? Thank you. Any luck? So there's another thing we're going to add, which is the recipe calls for a pepper, a dried pepper, and you can also use a fresh jalapeno. I had a fresh one over there, but I was asking Violet what kind of pepper she thought we should use, and she thought we should use a more mild pepper. So this is a dried pepper right here, and that one's not a good example. Let's see. Sometimes these dried peppers have stems on them. If you have the stem, you want to take that off. So we don't really want a stem in there. But this one doesn't have a stem. It looks like it already came off the top of that. This pepper is called a pasilla pepper. And it's just one I happen to have. It's a little bit smoky and it's very mild. So we're just going to pop that one in there. But if you wanted, you could use a spicier pepper, like jalapeno or something like that. You having trouble finding the measuring spoon, sweetie?
Yeah.
Let me help you out. Here they are. Alright. Alright, Vi, come on over here. So, we're going to want to do 2 teaspoons of coriander seeds. Okay? That's this one right here. Want to do 2 teaspoons of those? They're fun, they're like little ball bearings. We use coriander seed a lot at Clover. We use it in the falafel mixture that we make. We toast cumin seeds, whole cumin and whole coriander seeds, and we use that there. And we also toast and crush it for other recipes too. Awesome. All right. And then let's do, this is the oregano. So it says 2.5 teaspoons of oregano. So you got that. Got that one. 2. Awesome. Good job. Yeah, you want to add a half more? Awesome. And we're gonna wait. So those spices are gonna do well in there right now. We're gonna wait till the end of this to add the lemon juice because it's a little more fragile, and if we just boil that lemon juice away, we'll lose a lot of the fun fruity flavors of it. And we'll just have acid left. So we're just gonna wait a little while to put that in. Now, this needs to cook for a little while, and I had an idea. I was going to do seasoning cast iron pans, because that's something that somebody asked about earlier, and I will still get to that, but I was thinking we're probably going to eat this for dinner, and it might be good with some biscuits. What do you think of that? So I know, let's whip up some quick biscuits, and we're going to do some really simple biscuits, and then we'll get those baking and finish off with lentil soup. So Vi, we're gonna need, you wanna do them with real butter or do you wanna use the fake butter?
I might appreciate it if we just...
Yeah, okay, grab some of the fake butter, it'll work great. Alright, so what I'm gonna do for this, I'm going to use, these are gonna be a quick drop biscuit. I would normally use buttermilk here, but I think we're gonna probably make these a vegan style. As Blue, my son, he's a little bit lactose intolerant, so it's not a terrible thing, but if we can avoid it for him, it's better. And so let's make things up that way. And we're going to need some flour. All right, so this is going to be loud for a minute. Sorry about that. There's a couple different kinds of flour in here. This is a rye berry right here. And then this is a hard winter wheat, which I don't know if you were on the show the other day. This was like up to here. It's been just falling because I'm doing a lot of bread lately. And then this is a soft wheat right here. It's a soft white wheat. And so I'm going to get a little bit of that soft one because I want the biscuits to be flaky and not too tough. So this is going to be very loud for a minute. Sorry about that. You can dance or entertain people while it's going. And then you get the cutter. Butter, do a pastry cutter. It's like the pastry cutter there we use for pie. Okay, we'll post a recipe for this. If you, at home, you could just use an all-purpose flour. That would work really well. If you have a pastry flour, you could use that. And I'm stepping over Tulip here to get a measuring spoon. I'm going to put this whole amount in because it's the right amount. I would usually make these just from feel, but I'm going to measure it so I can post a recipe. So there's 1 cup. There's 2 cups. There's 3 cups. So let's see, that's about 3 cups. It's very fluffy when it comes out of the grinder. So if you're using an all-purpose flour at home, I'd say, let's do that 3 cups. And then the amount of salt we'll add will probably be about 1/2 teaspoon. Let's say half a teaspoon of salt. And we're going to add a little bit of pepper to this. That's just some fresh ground pepper. Maybe that's about a quarter of a teaspoon or so. And I think that'll be pretty good. We need to add some baking soda and baking powder to this. So baking soda needs acid to activate it, and baking powder needs heat to activate it. It's actually double acting, so part of it will be activated by acid and part of it will be activated by heat. Do we have the measuring spoon? Because this is another one I would probably just do it by feel. But let's do a teaspoon of baking powder, and we're not going to do buttermilk, but maybe we'll just put a little acid in this too, right? Huh? This one's like that. All right, and we're going to let's do half a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay. So we did half a teaspoon baking soda, 1 teaspoon baking powder. Then we're going to mix this around, and there's some salt in there, there's a little bit of pepper in there, there's flour in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take butter. This is 15 ounces of buttery spread. So this is a vegan butter, but you could use real butter, and yeah, and you use a good amount. So this is the fun thing about biscuits. They have a lot of fat in them. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to use about half of that. Yeah. And then this is a pastry cutter. It's an invaluable tool, and I really think it's one of those tools I would hate to live without. You can substitute for this with a knife or a couple knives or a fork, but it's really hard to get the same effect. And what I'm doing is I'm just using that pastry cutter to cut through that butter. I don't want to touch the butter too much, because when my hand touches it, it melts it a little bit. And I really want chunks of butter that's not melted. And so, all right, you want to get, so there's almond milk in the fridge. We might need to use up that almond milk and also add a little bit of oat milk to it.
Okay.
And so when I'm doing this, I'm going to aim for a texture in the flour that looks a little bit like cornmeal. So I'm looking for like a graininess to the flour mixture. Got it, perfect. And then if you want to get a liquid measuring cup, I should probably measure this instead of just guessing. All right, so I've been cutting this butter substitute into the flour.
Are these the cover?
The liquid one, like the one that's like a flexible cup, the bluish colored ones, the light blue colored ones, silicone. All right. So you can see this is pretty moist, but at this point there's no liquid in there. It's just from the fat. And now what we're going to do is, this is some almond milk I made a few days ago, and we'll use that up. And this is some oat milk. We'll just add a little bit of that in too, because my almond milk wasn't quite enough. I should have measured how much I put. Sorry, I forgot it for the... It's really hard. I usually don't cook by recipes when I do this kind of thing. I think that was probably about a cup of liquid at this point. And we'll probably add... that's probably going to be good, actually. So what I would do is add it in, and I look at the texture. I'm working with whole wheat flour here, and so it's going to be a little bit grainy, but it's going to taste delicious. All right, we're just about ready to go. Do you want to do them dropping them out of a spoon, or do you want to roll them out?
I think
You want to roll? Okay, when I was a kid, my dad would make drop biscuits for a meal like this with soup.
and he used a spoon and just dropped some on a pan. But we are going to do something a little more fancy here. You want to get the rolling pin, Violet? So this is a pretty moist dough, and it's going to be pretty flaky too. It doesn't really hold together very well, which is just what we want. So we want it to come apart in the end. And now I'm going to put a little bit more flour on top of that. Because it's such a moist dough, I'm being pretty generous with the flour on the table surface underneath and on top as well. You want to do it? So Violet's going to come down in the middle, and then very gently she's going to come back. Then she's going to come to the middle again, and very gently she's going to push forward. Then I'm going to come to this side and gently push that way, come back to the middle, and gently push this way. I'm going to continue to expand this a little bit. Now, this is a funny thing about rolling pins. When I'm doing this, that's where the pressure is coming. At this point, what I'm really doing is starting over again in the middle and going this direction. Sometimes when you see people doing this quickly, who do it a lot, when you see a baker, you may see their hand roll it, and you may see them go like this. They're probably putting pressure here and not putting pressure here. But I think sometimes people get confused, and they start going way, way, way like that and wailing away at it, which can make this tough, and we don't really want to do that. So I'll try and be clear about what I'm doing. So push it in the middle and pressing gently away. And we want to keep these so tender and flaky. So we have here a little cup. You could use, if you didn't have, you could use a jar. We can even try one like that to cut your biscuit. You can go thicker or more thin. These are like a little more on the thin side, but it's all up to preference. You have to cook them a little longer if you go thicker. And you need to do them all the same thickness because otherwise they'll get ready at different rates and you'll have a bit of a mess. Do you want to use this to cut them out?
Sure.
All right. Now, the lentils have just hit a full boil, which is nice. So I'm going to keep an eye on those and make sure they have enough liquid in them. Right now they look pretty good. All right, and then one thing we can do when we're doing this is try to make the cuts close to one another so we don't waste any of the dough. See how I can't quite fit there, but there's one good fit. You want to try that? And when I'm putting that down, I'm sort of spinning it left and right. I'm like feeling the table underneath it, and that's making sure I'm really cutting all the way through it. Nice job, Vi. And that one's going to be like a half moon, but that's fine. We can have any shapes we want in there. All right. And we'll put those in. This is going in a hot oven, so we're at 450 right now, and these will cook pretty quickly. This soup needs about a half hour, and I think our biscuits should be ready by the time the soup is ready. Now, I'm going to get one more out of this roll. And this leftover dough, we're not going to waste it. We're going to bring it back to the center. And we might need a little more flour there. All right, so that's just so it doesn't stick. You want to do this one, Vi? Go for it. So I mentioned earlier I like to dirty as few dishes as possible. I'm using the same spoon for both of these things, just washing it a little bit in between. But I think that the less you make dirty, the more fun it is to cook. And now if you want to look at these, this is a good thing to sort of beware. What's happened, the beans have expanded a lot. And as a result, like if you look in here, there's a lot of lentils and there's not much stock. So I'm going to add more liquid at this point. And Blue's right over there. Hey Blue, will you fill that up for me, bud?
Sure.
All right. So I need to add more liquid in here because right now it's a little bit dry. And if it kept going like this, it would burn. It's not quite there yet, but it would at some point. All right, looks good, Vi. You want to try and cut some biscuits out of there? So I'm gonna add that liquid in there. Now you can see there's a little more broth. And I think that, let's see how this goes. I may end up having to switch to a larger pot, which is okay. I may have misjudged the size of this recipe, but let's give it a little more time. I'm looking at it and wondering if it expands a whole lot more, this is gonna be too small a pot for it. How are you doing on that? Good? Okay, let's pop these in here. You can help, Blue.
Okay.
Yeah. This look like fun?
Yeah.
We're making these vegan for you.
Cool.
Blue has to do a project for school right now, and he's interested in vegan bodybuilders and stuff. So he's studying about that. Were you studying that today?
Yeah.
Did you learn any good facts?
Today we didn't do facts. We mostly just talked about it.
Uh-huh. Okay. And let's put that one in. And the others that are in there right now, they're starting to puff up. That's the baking powder and the baking soda acting. And so you can see them puffing up a little bit. They need a little more time. All right. And this one I'm just gonna pat out in my hand. If you don't have a rolling pin, that can work fine too with biscuits. They're pretty forgiving things. And let's just get the last ones out of here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, maybe there's one more. What do you think?
One more.
One more biscuit? This one's going to be the very last one. So at this point, this biscuit's going to be a little tougher than the others because it's
No, you don't.
been handled more. She can get out if you want. Alright, and we're going to get an auxiliary baking pan here. Alright, there we go. That'll be fine. And they're all hopping around me. Alright. Alright, the biscuits are coming along. The lentil soup looks like it's getting pretty close. So, if we're lucky, it's going to be close enough to start to season it. Let me get a spoon so we can taste it. Alright. So, I want to get a couple lentils, and I want to get a little bit of stock, but I don't want to get too much in there because it's going to be very hot. I'm going to blow on it. I smell it a little bit, and then I'm going to taste the lentil. And I'm tasting for doneness because it's going to taste unsalted because it doesn't have salt in it yet. And I'm going to taste the broth a little bit. So they're in a really good spot. So it's a good starting place for me. I want to taste what it tastes like. Now we'll season it. And so when you're seasoning a soup, you get to play around with sweetness on one side, and you get to play around with sourness or acid on another side. And those things usually tug against one another. And then you've got salt to play with, and you have pepperiness, and you have fat. And those become all of the different things that you can do at the end of the soup to adjust its flavor. And so what we do at Clover, and this is just a great practice in making a soup, is we finish every soup with those things in mind. So we finish them carefully. And what I'm going to do here, the acid we're working with is the lemon. And the acid and the salt, they can both push in the same direction. So since I know that we want this to be lemony, I'm going to start with the lemons. Because if I started with the salt, I could get it to the place I thought was perfect, and then I add the lemons, and it might throw the salt off. It might feel too salty at that point. So we're going to start with the lemons and get all the lemon juice in there that we want, and then we're going to come back and add some salt in. So I'm cutting these lemons in half. It's a similar thing to what I was doing with the onion, holding it like that. And then I've got this, which can take juice out of the lemon, or I have this, which can take juice out of the lemon. This one's a little faster. If you don't have either of these, you could just use your hand. And I'm just going to squeeze the lemon directly in. And there's one. Second one. Third one. And now the lemon juice is in there. I'm going to turn the temperature down a little bit because it boils a little bit violent for me right now. We're going to have a taste of this. And I do think that we need to switch this to a larger pot because I think it's just a little bit crowded in there. So let's go with this big cast iron pot. Sorry, sweetie. There you go. All right. Okay. So that's going to give us a little more room to work with. Vi, you want to give me some more water, sweetie?
Sure.
All right. Now, it is important that you're getting to this is sort of a brothy soup. We want the amount of soup stock or broth, or in this case the water we're adding, we want it to be similar to how we want to serve it, because a lot of the flavor is going to be floating around there, and if I made this too dry and then I added a bunch of water and later, it would throw it all off. So that's why we're making this transfer right now and getting it to the right place. It smells really yummy. All those different spices are coming out of it right now. All right, Vi, you want to bring that over? Let's add some water to this, sweetie. That's full, huh? All right. So this is closer to where we want to be, which is really great. Now we've added that lemon in there. I'm gonna have a little quick taste, see where it is. So it's really yummy, lemony background note to it now. So now we're gonna add the salt. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with about a teaspoon of salt. I'm gonna mix that in and I'm gonna taste it. That's not gonna be enough salt, but I wanna start deliberately with a little less than I'm gonna need in the end. So here's my biscuits coming out. Now, if we wanted to fancy these up, we could brush them with a little butter on the top or something like that, but these are going to be very simple biscuits we're going to have today. Okay, so you could brush a little heavy cream on the top of them. So let's see what we got here. You want to get another spoon, Violet?
Sure.
So I'm going to put another teaspoon of salt in, but this is the way the process is going to go, is just adding a bit at a time. You can't take salt away once you put too much in, you can't take it away. And what I'm looking for is I'm always looking for, with the soup and with other things I'm making, it might be a little hot, so just be careful. I'm always looking for a spot where I want more. And it tastes really good and I want another bite. And so that's what I'm always thinking about when I put it in my mouth. Like, how much do I want another bite? When I get success, it's like when I really, really want another bite of something. And what do you think of that?
I did add a little more.
A little more salt. Let me take a little taste of that. And with salt, you don't want to get to a place where something tastes salty. And at this one, as I'm adding the salt, that lemon juice flavor is really coming out. I was mentioning before, lemon and salt can sort of work in the same direction together. All right. Well, we got another spot we can taste it there, by. I'm gonna wash my spoon off too. All right. You can go ahead. So at this point we're mostly tasting the broth, and I think it needs even more. What do you think?
Yeah.
We'll do another teaspoon. Okay.
How is the 3 teaspoons of salt?
Mm-hmm. You grab me another spoon.
Sure.
And I'm smelling the other biscuits. Pull those guys out. Is this one for me? Do you agree?
Yeah.
All right, put another teaspoon of salt in there.
That's 4.
So we're up to 4. Yep. Will you wash mine off too, Vi? Thank you. All right. So right now we've dealt with the acid, we've dealt with the saltiness. The other things we could play around with would be the sweetness. We could bring pepper in it, we can bring fat in there. It's yummy. I'm going to give it a little more salt. What do you think? Think it's a good choice?
Yeah.
Okay.
Add teaspoons.
I'll wash my spoon again. Thank you. It's getting close. I think you could still use a little bit more. What do you think?
Probably like 1 or 2 more.
And the amount of salt you might need, it might be different than what we need because it probably depends a little bit what kind of salt you're using. But I would definitely do this stage of it to taste. Like I said, I think it's really, really hard to finish a soup based exactly on what a recipe tells you. You're playing a game with me, huh? All right. What do you think, Brian? It's getting there. I'm gonna get a little more salt. It's running a little low in that. What do you think? A little more salt? Yeah. All right. Let's try that one. Thank you. So this might seem funny that we're spending as much time finishing the soup as we did really to put it in, but that's how soup is a lot of times. And this time you take at the end is the difference between an okay soup and a really, really yummy soup. So I've got some ground pepper here that I'm going to add in. Let me see. It's getting really yummy. Careful to blow on it. Oh, and I get a little bit of that pepper. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely
It's getting yummy.
better.
All right, okay, let's try another. And the consistency is looking really, really nice for like what I would aim for with this soup. So the ratio of the broth to the lentils, you can see me moving around in there a little bit. All right. Oh, it's getting super yummy. It is. Brooke's laughing at us. I would, normally if I'm making the soup, I would probably have added a pretty big handful of salt right at the very beginning. But we are going step by step so you can all like appreciate
Probably put like 10.
that. And you do, yeah, and you do need to like step up to it slowly till you get to the spot that's just right. You gonna wash that for me? Thank you, sweetie. And last, biscuits can come out. All right, and so Violet, do you want to grab, I think we can set this up in a bowl so people can see what it would be like.
Sure.
Can you grab a plate and a bowl? It's really nice. The lemon is really lemony. The salt is just perfect. It doesn't taste salty, but all the flavors are really bright and coming through in a really nice way. And the recipe mentioned that you can serve it with thin slices of lemon. That sounds like fun. So let's try that. And so what we might do here is be eating this together, which we will be probably in a little while for dinner. I might take a nice healthy ladle of that soup and put it in the bowl, and then maybe we even garnish it with a couple of these lemons, which I think is really fun. And I would probably add a little bit of a nice olive oil on the top, just a little bit there, and then maybe a couple biscuits. All right, there we go. And this would be a really nice meal. And if you wanted a heavier meal, maybe we'd add some salad or something else with it. What do you think, Vi? You want to tell us what it tastes like? You can be the taste tester. It's probably a little bit hot, so just be careful. So that concludes our lentil soup and our bonus biscuit recipe. I still need to get back to the cast iron seasoning. We'll do that in a later show. And we will post the recipes that I used here for both these things. We'll also post some links to Crescent Dragon Wagon's site and also to the Washington Post article. So those of you who are interested in that can read a little more about that story. Thanks, guys, for joining today. Thanks, Violet, for helping. Was it worth it? Does it taste good?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be back tomorrow.